Okay. Okay. Do we have visual? Cool. Thank you. Hi, my name is Kathleen Siminyu, and I am honored to be here with you today. I will be taking you on a short exploratory journey of language, voice, technology, and community. Okay, the clicker works. During my presentation, you will observe how these four elements interact and shape one another. In a way, I would like to think of these elements as a harmonious quartet, critical for building inclusive technology. I will be sharing our case study work on building open source Kiswahili voice datasets for the Common Voice project, which I am extremely proud of. Okay. But first, a brief introduction of my work. I am a machine learning fellow at Mozilla Foundation, where I work as a builder supporting the Kiswahili language. Kiswahili is one of 8 African languages on the Common Voice platform. I also wear 2 other hats, one as a community organizer and the other as a natural language processing researcher. I have been organizing tech communities for as long as I have been working in tech. So first, I co-organized the Nairobi Women in Machine Learning and Data Science community, a platform for women to explore these fields and showcase their work. I am a member of the Deep Learning Indaba committee, and this is an initiative to strengthen African machine learning. We have several programs in support of this mission, the main one being an annual event that brings together Africans working in AI. I also worked as regional coordinator of AI4D, that's Artificial Intelligence for Development, where one of the programs I created and coordinated was listed as one of the MIT Technology Review 35 Innovators Under 35 list for 2022. And I'm a member of the Masakhane Research Foundation Committee, and this is an organization working to strengthen African natural language processing. Then on the NLP front, I'm working in speech recognition, building further on earlier works in phoneme recognition for the Luhya languages. And these are a group of languages spoken in the western region of Kenya and parts of eastern Uganda. And now, my main focus is working in speech recognition for Kiswahili. I have divided the session into 4 parts, or 4 chapters. I will first give an overview of the Common Voice initiative, and then we will dig deeper into our Kiswahili community building work, how we are approaching the intersection of gender and technology, and engaging linguists. Thereafter, I will briefly take you through growing the datasets and our most recent project, where we are incubating 8 grantees working on voice-enabled products for women, smallholder farmers, and marginalized communities. Okay, on to the introduction. Launched in June of 2017, Mozilla's Project Common Voice aims to build open and publicly available datasets of labeled audio that anybody can use to train voice-enabled applications. Speech is becoming a preferred way to interact with personal electronics, and the future of human-machine interaction lies in voice control. However, developers, researchers, and startups around the globe working on voice recognition technology face one problem, and this is a lack of publicly available voice data in their respective languages to train speech-to-text engines. Most of the data used by large corporations are not available for the majority of people, They are expensive to obtain or simply non-existent for languages not globally spread. We think that stifles innovation and ultimately exacerbates bias. So we've launched Common Voice, a project to help make voice recognition open and accessible to everyone. Common Voice champions the collection of voice data in a safe and ethical way that can be used to train speech recognition algorithms. And I will be speaking particularly about building the Kiswahili speech recognition dataset on Common Voice. My favorite thing about this project is the fact that it makes it super simple to start building speech recognition resources for the languages that you care about. If you don't have to worry about starting to build a data collection platform, because that is essentially what Common Voice provides. You don't have to worry about where the data is stored or how it is going to be stored. Common Voice also abstracts these, and you essentially get to leverage the engineering and storage capacity of the Mozilla Foundation, or rather the efforts that they're putting towards this project. There is comprehensive documentation on how you can get started. So if your language currently does not exist, you'll need to begin with localizing the website and then creating and collecting a text corpus. So this slide has some useful content to links and documentation that can be leveraged in the early stages of getting a language onto Common Voice. And I'll be sure to share it with the organizers so that in case you are interested, you have access to these resources. Then, this is what the platform looks like after localization and collection of sentences. It's now ready for the voice data, or the stage of collecting voice data. Users can contribute to the corpus either by recording voice clips and donating their voices, or by validating clips that have already been recorded. Now let's talk Kiswahili. Kiswahili is estimated to have 200 million speakers in the Eastern Africa region as a native or bilingual language. Our Kiswahili work received a major development boost after receiving 3-year project funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, GIZ, and the German Development Corporation, and the UK, GIZ, the German Development Corporation, and the UK's Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. The core work is aimed at building skills and capabilities within Mozilla and the East Africa region, and democratizing voice technology through community engagement and contribution, with a sharpened focus on use case development within agriculture and finance. According to our latest dataset release, we now have 753 hours of data, 752 actually. Our target is to get this dataset between 1,000 and 2,000 hours of data in the coming year. And in theory, this should be big enough to build a good speech recognition system. Being cognizant of the fact that voice recognition systems are often biased with poor representation of women and older populations, we are also working to ensure that these demographics, which are likely to be underrepresented in the corpus, are intentionally included at the point of data collection. So you can already see from the screenshot on the slide, which details the latest available Kiswahili datasets, that older people are already the minority. So 44% of contributors lie between 19 and 29 years old, and then 14% are 30 to 39, and then older has even less representation. And then with the gender balance, it's currently 38% male and 34% female, which is relatively balanced. And these are dynamics that we are continually working to counter, and particularly with regards to the gender challenges, I will speak more about this ahead. Community is core to the Common Voice project and Mozilla Foundation at large. And a large component of our work focuses on community building efforts. And a community member is an individual who falls into one or more definitions, primarily which are shown here. So you could be a voice donor by getting onto the platform and recording your voice. You could be a sentence creator by uploading sentences that you have written. You could be a voice validator by getting onto the platform, listening to recordings that have been made and validating that the audio matches the sentence that it's supposed to accompany. And finally, the voice dataset user or the developer is the person who at the end of the day comes, downloads the dataset, and, for example, trains a speech recognition model. Then, in addition to these, we have found great success in engaging with individuals known as community champions. And these are individuals in the community that have shown a great interest in the language and in growing a more diverse dataset for inclusive technology. We work to identify champions in Kiswahili-speaking countries, such as Kenya, Tanzania, and the Democratic Republic of Congo so far. And this team is led by my colleague, Brighton Mwasaru. Community champions are encouraged to host events. We strive to keep our champions motivated and supported in their work by providing resources and incentives, such as internet bundles, badges on the Common Voice platform, and certificates of participation. They are also granted opportunities to participate in conferences related to technology, Kiswahili, and broadly language technology. Community champions can host a variety of events around broadening their size and inclusivity reach. We emphasize that content generated from these activities be made available to the public through an open license, as the entire Common Voice dataset is CC0, which is the no copyright reserved option in the Creative Commons toolkit. These events can also be a mix of virtual and physical sessions, for example, by having pre-recorded videos played during physical activities. Now let's turn our attention to gender representation in voice technology. Central to our work is the inclusion of women, and there are a variety of reasons why women are underrepresented in voice technology. In the slide, I have listed 6, but I will expound on 2 factors. The first being why there are fewer female-rich datasets, and the other key component, which is trust. So to the first. The majority of voice programs are geared towards profit generation and are often created to cater for specific markets, often using white male voices. Therefore, it is difficult to find sex disaggregation of data sets to at least indicate the extent of participation for purposes of gender analysis. In addition, even when designed to be open and inclusive, there is a challenge of female voice contributions. For example, with English voice donations, it shows that, well, in the dataset available on Common Voice, we have seen that male voices dominate at 47%, while women fall behind at only 15%. We have slightly better metrics in our Kiswahili dataset, as you saw, and this is something that we are extremely proud of. But with the lack of representation of female voices within datasets to train the models, it then becomes difficult to find the patterns within the data that are representative of the female population. And this is what leads to bias in the algorithms or the models created. And the second issue I will highlight is trust. So issues around privacy and data protection impact how women interact with voice technologies. There are concerns around increased surveillance, bias, and discrimination, as well as data governance that shape the levels of trust for women and gender-diverse people. UNESCO recommends that AI should address issues of consent and confirmation of ethical use of data, privacy, and security for girls and women. The Web Foundation also, in their research, found that 54% of female respondents said they would not allow companies to use any of their data, compared with 47% of men. Gender is diverse, it is heterogeneous, and it is tied to societal constructs about roles, about expectations, and practices that do impact and shape participation of gender groups, and in particular women, differently than men. So we are working to build a diverse and inclusive voice community that is accessible to all. Taking into account these issues, together with other structural issues impacting gender inequality, such as location, sexual orientation, education, region, and accent. Then the two areas we chose to focus on in application building, agriculture and finance, also have a direct socioeconomic impact on women. The majority of farmers in local communities are women. We recognize that inclusivity requires us to be intentional about how we address the challenges that hinder access, participation, and true agency. We have a guiding gender action plan, which functions as our compass to navigate what measures and actions we need to take to achieve inclusivity, what indicators we should be keeping track of, and our targets towards attaining gender parity. And this work is led by my colleague, Rebecca Riakitimbo. We also strive to ensure gender balance in community building and across various axes, such as location, accent, age, income, and educational background. We are addressing gender concerns through our participatory guidelines. We are making sure to aggregate and label data by gender to ensure that at the end of the day it can be disaggregated by gender. And finally, our work takes a participatory approach. We're not only looking or seeking to include women within the data set or at the point of data collection. We'd like them to be a part of the process from ideation to data collection, to use case development, to model creation, all the way to application building. So nothing for us without us. It takes a village to build inclusive data sets. So here's how we're working with linguists and language experts. You may be asking yourself, why do we need linguists? But then this is a very diverse crowd, so maybe you aren't. But the response, I would say, is to make voice technology sound like us. Speech recognition systems, again, have been found to be biased or fall short in scenarios where the source data is not balanced. And balance implies having equal quantities of data available in different categories represented in the data. For instance, research has shown speech recognition to be more accurate for men than it is for women, and more accurate for individuals younger than 30 years of age than those older than 30 years old. Some other characteristics of data sets that may present bias in downstream applications, if not balanced, are accents, dialects, and variations of languages. And these biases further widen access disparities along age, location, gender, and education levels. I'll say the most surprising thing that came out of our engagement with linguists was the socio-linguistic learnings. We went into the process hoping to learn from them if they had a finite language for the accents, the dialects, and the variants within Kiswahili-speaking populations. And of course they didn't. A huge learning for us in that sense is that language is alive and evolving, and it's very hard to define it in finite terms. But then the sociolinguistic learnings, again, were more surprising. So what we know today as standardized Kiswahili actually has a controversial history, and it may surprise you to learn that among the Swahili people, there is some level of dissociation from the standardized language. And this is because locals were largely not consulted or involved in the process of selecting what dialect to standardize. So what we know as Kiswahili today originated from a dialect known as Kiunguja. And there are 23 known Kiswahili dialects, 13 of which are more widely used than others. The decision of which dialect to standardize was made exclusively by missionaries, and it was based on what locals spoke in areas where they were stationed. It was also based on their own familiarity of the languages and had little to do with the people themselves. A problem later on arose that the standardized dialect was not linguistically rich enough and needed supplementary vocabulary. And once again, the Swahili people were not involved, which related in a further growing distance between Kiunguja, which again is a dialect selected for standardization, and the Kiswahili, which emerged after the process of standardization. Then with standard Kiswahili came efforts to drive its propagation by ensuring it is a language taught and used in schools. And this gave rise to a phenomenon known as linguistic insecurity, which is the negative self-image of a speaker regarding his or her own speech variety or language. There are presently Kiswahili dialects on the brink of extinction and others progressively falling away from use. And again, I'll reiterate that for us, a big learning was understanding that if we build just for standard Kiswahili, we actually risk doing what, let's say English, being a widely spoken language, has done to other languages by making them fall away from use. So how does this knowledge of the language's evolution shape our work? By ignoring the history of the language and its speakers, we risk alienating the very people our resource should be benefiting. We have been engaging and working with linguists to identify the dominant dialects and variants of Kiswahili that are widely used presently, and to curate texts that are reflective of the variants and the dialects which are identified as prevalent. In comparison to the work being done for the wider Kiswahili dataset, these subsets will be significantly smaller, but our intention is to have the texts and the audio collected from the respective communities be subsets of the whole. And these subsets will have two main purposes. The first is to help us quantitatively evaluate how our models and downstream applications perform on related dialects and variants. And the second is, in the event that the performance is degraded for different demographics, we would like to make resources available to developers so that depending on the particular local context they are building for, they will be able to fine-tune so as to improve performance if and where necessary. Continual analysis of our datasets has revealed to us two aspects of our community activities that I would like to highlight. The first is that we struggle and have struggled to access suitable CC0 text content that can be uploaded onto the platform and included as part of the datasets. And another way to look at this is that our community prefers to contribute their voices. Our community prefers to contribute their voices more than they do creating Kiswahili text content. The second characteristics is that our community still prefers contributing their voices in comparison to validating already existing audios on the platform. These two preferences of our community have been bottlenecks to our work. Having few sentences relative to their accompanying audios means that there is a lot of repetition in the data sets. And despite more data being considered better, a lot of repetition presents its own challenges. For example, it increases the risk of our model overfitting. Second, because our process of creating the train, dev, and test sets for model training prioritizes audio that is already validated, if we are to stick by our own rules, despite having close to 500,000 audios, only about 100K would be included in the model building data. However, as you will see in our experiments, we are of course working to maximize on data use. And given that the community engagement activities are ongoing, we have worked to encourage greater participation in creating text content through topical write-a-thon sessions and encouraging a focus on voice validation as well. The first experiment on our roadmap tackles exactly this question: more data versus less repetition, which matters more for Kiswahili automatic speech recognition. This work is to help us determine the usefulness of our dataset as it stands. How much repetition can be reasonably included in a training dataset before this leads to a degradation of performance of the output model? In the experimental settings, we increase the text to audio ratio along a geometric progression up to the maximum number of audios available, which in some cases is 11 or 12. And the intent is to examine at which point an increase in repetition, will lead to, which will also be additional data for the model, will lead to a decrease in output model performance. Another experiment is to determine whether transfer learning from a pre-trained acoustic model of a language that is linguistically closely related to our target language, i.e. Kiswahili, will lead to better results than in instances where the pre-trained acoustic model is of an arbitrary language, such as English. And it helps that previous phases of this work focused on Kinyarwanda, which is a language spoken in Rwanda. And now there's about 1,800 hours of Kinyarwanda data available on Common Voice. So it's great that we have access to some data sets that can make these experiments possible. Unfortunately, I don't have results to share at this point, but eventually I'm really looking forward to the learnings that come out of this. Let's now move to the application use of the Kiswahili dataset. So this year, through the support of our funders, the Gates Foundation, the UK's Commonwealth and Development Office, and GIZ, we were able to grant 8 projects, each 50,000 USD, leveraging the Kiswahili language to build voice-enabled products. We asked developers to engage local communities and, in close collaboration, build solutions in finance and in agriculture. These solutions must illustrate a community-based outreach and be accessible to marginalized groups such as women living in rural areas and smallholder farmers in Kenya, Tanzania, and the Kiswahili-speaking parts of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Some of the proposed projects currently being developed include a table banking chatbot with a mobile money API that allows members to keep track of transactions. Another project enables farmers to access weather information and adapts their farming practices to the changing patterns, and another provides legal information on land rights to women. We realize that from our community engagement efforts, we realize that for non-technical stakeholders, all our work is abstract until they actually see these resources in use. So our grantees are, in some way, the first tangible output for the communities we are building for. We are therefore eager to see the promising results of these projects. That actually brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening. I encourage you to participate in our mission by sharing our work with your social networks. Feel free to follow us at Mozilla on our social media pages and use the hashtag Common Voice. And I'd also love to connect on Twitter, so you can find me at Siminyu_cat. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your conference attendance.